Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another Gel Press YouTube channel video. Today I'm going to be showing how to create and use your extra gel press backgrounds because I know that sometimes when we create we end up with a whole stack in the end of the day that we don't know what to do with. So today I did a couple different paper piecing cards and techniques to use up those backgrounds on some beautiful cards. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I'm starting off with my larger gel press. This one is 8 by 10 inches, and I like the kind of bigger surface area so that if I create several backgrounds at once, I can fit a couple different cards on there to take up the background print. So I'm going to do a couple prints in today's video, but of course, if you already have them, this is a great way to use them up, but I wanted to create some of mine for this one. So I like to remove the top piece of plastic and then keep the bottom one on because I find it helps me to move things around a little bit. And then for today's technique, I'm going to use Reinkers, and I want them to kind of stay put a little bit more, and I find this clear sticky Versamark ink helps do that a little bit. It's not necessary, but I find that it helps to hold them in place a little bit more. So I'm going to use my Simon Hurley Create ink pad reinkers. You could use a lot of different dye ink reinkers. I find that mine have a little bit of a thicker consistency to them, so again, it helps stay in place a little bit more. Then I'm going to take a couple of oranges, pinks, and purples and spread them across the surface of my gel press. A little bit of this reinker goes a long way because it's super highly concentrated color. Then I'm going to take my brayer and I'm just going to brayer it back and forth to kind of blend some of those colors together and smooth out the reinker a little bit. Now once I've done that and I've got kind of a thin layer of ink across the surface, I can then pick up my print. Here I'm using my Simon Hurley Create Stark White Cardstock because it takes the ink really nicely and it's super bright white too. So there we have our first print. I love how bold and vibrant the color is when you lay it down with the reinkers like that. Now if I want to add to this print, I'm going to add a little bit more of the darkest color that I added. I think this here is Prom Queen. And then I'm going to end up brayering that out again so I have a nice layer of that one color down on the surface of my gel press. Now for this, I'm going to add a stencil down, and here I'm using the bubble wrap stencil from Simon Hurley Create. You'll see it kind of sticks to the gel press a little bit there. Then I'm going to lay my background that I've already done back over top of that stencil, and I find that you have to give a little bit of good pressure to this. So I ended up using just a stamping kind of pressure tool. There are a lot of these out in the market right now, and I find that they help to kind of give good pressure as you're stamping down or using the gel press. So here, with that pressure, I was able to transfer that pattern right through the stencil onto my card and get this really cool dot texture that's kind of tone on tone. Now you can also go in with another piece of my Stark White cardstock and just lay it down onto the surface of that excess ink. I didn't touch it at all afterwards. Give it some good pressure on the surface there, and that's going to give me a really fun print of that dot texture from that stencil, and it'll also leave some kind of bubbles and textures in that gel press, which I think is super cool. That reinker leaves behind a little bit of texture. Now for this next background, I'm going to use a little bit of green. Now for florals, you'll want to use kind of a pink and a green, but it depends what you're doing. If you're doing like a shirt on somebody's stamped image, you totally can do that too. Just play around with the different colors in your backgrounds and what you want to stamp with them. Now I'm going to add a little bit of reinker down in some stripes. Here I used some light greens and yellows, and then I'm going to brayer that out over top of the surface there. Now for this one, I'm going to pick it up again using an A2 size card in that Stark White cardstock and pick that right up. That creates a really nice and super vibrant and saturated colored background. And then I'm going to do the exact same technique. I really like this one with the stencils where I'm able to brayer out the darkest color that I used. So here I think I used a little bit of fake plant. And then once that's all brayered out and you've got a nice smooth layer, I can add down a stencil. Here I'm using the stained glass stencil from Simon Hurley Create. And then I can add my background down. Now since this one had even thinner openings, it really does help to have lots of pressure. So you can go along with a pressure tool like this, or you can also use your brayer to give a good amount of pressure as well. It'll just transfer a little bit of color to the back, but nobody's going to see that anyway, so it doesn't matter. So either one of those to give lots of good pressure, and then you have that really fun tone-on-tone background transferred through the surface there. And then I also printed down that same thing using the excess ink that was on the surface. I don't know why I did it on a Slimline card base. I just ended up stamping on that later on. So here I'm going to take my stamped images. I'm using the Fresh Cut Flowers background stamp from Hurley Create. This one's a slimline background stamp, but it's got little peel apart pieces, so you can use all of the stamps separately as well, which I think is really awesome. Here I pulled them apart, and for this first green background, I'm going to stamp down all of my leaf images or anything that I want to be green. So I've stamped down a couple of the leaves in this, and I'm just adding them onto the same acrylic block and stamping them down using some jet black Archival ink so that it stands out on the background. And then I'm also going to stamp down any image that kind of has like a bud to it. So you'll see this top one has a flower, which I want to be a different color, but the bottom part I want to stay green. So I stamped that down once as well. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the pink background here, just stamp down all other parts that I want to be this color. So here I wanted the 2 flowers to be this color, and then same thing with that kind of bud. I'm just going to stamp down the top of that one because I want that to be pink. So then I'm going to go around and fussy cut out my images here. Now I know a lot of people don't like fussy cutting, and in that case you could totally go in with like a scan and cut and scan these out and really quickly cut them out. But I think fussy cutting is pretty fun and easy for me, and I also love these scissors. I really recommend them. They are Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. I'll have them linked down below, but they really help to get a nice smooth and even cut. And I'm just going to go in, and also I like to move my paper instead of moving my scissors. This helps to get a nice smooth line. But alongside of that, these scissors have a really fine tip so I can get into the details. And also that spring kind of springs back out at you, so your hand doesn't get tired from kind of opening and closing your scissors because it's doing it for you. So I find that with all of those tips, it really helps me to get a nice smooth cut along all of my images. And on these, I'm leaving a little bit of a border around it as well. So I find that to also help. The border doesn't need to be perfect as you're cutting around it. You just need to kind of go lightly around the whole image, and you don't need to go in all the details then, which I find to be really helpful as well when leaving that little tiny border around the surface. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to then take that top kind of bud area and add it down onto that green that we cut for the base of that image. This really is a lot of fun to kind of give the two-toned look. So you can do that with any image if it's like a flower like this, to make sure that each one is colored like it would be, so that bottom bud is still green then. Now to create a background for this card, I'm going to use one of my circle gel press plates. I love this little circle plate to create some really fun backgrounds and to change up the shapes on your surface. So I'm going to again pull off the top area of that, and here I want just a really light background that is going to be kind of subtle. So again, I added a little bit of Over the Moon Reinker on here, and then I'm going to brayer that out on the surface. I'm going to use the exact same bubble wrap stencil here to add that circle texture into this. And I'm going to go in with a cloth and remove those circles wherever that ink is. So you'll see I'm going to remove that ink off the surface there, and it's going to leave whatever ink is underneath my stencil. So it'll give me kind of this stencil pattern with a little bit of texture. Then with the circle one, I'm able to kind of flip it over and stamp it right down onto my card base. I didn't do it centered. I actually left a little bit of it kind of hanging off the edge of the card for a little bit of interest and detail on the surface there. Now once I'm done adding that pressure down, I can then lift it off of the surface, and there we have a beautiful transfer for that background. Now I've kind of planned out how I want my flower cluster to be. I've clustered one of the main flowers, a bud coming out from the side, and then a couple different leaves. And then I'm going to keep that flower in place and kind of take those leaves out one by one and glue them in. I find that doing it like this helps me know exactly how it's going to be laid out, and then I can glue everything down onto the surface. It helps to keep that flower kind of focal place in the center there without gluing it down though, so you can still tuck everything into the center without anything moving around and making sure you still have that grounding place there. I like to adhere lots of the leaves down with just liquid adhesive flat onto the card. And then once everything is all adhered down underneath there, I like to add a little bit of foam tape on the pieces that I want to stand up. So I added a little foam tape onto the center flower, and also I added some foam tape onto the top bud of that pink one, other flower, so that those two kind of stand out on the card there. To add a sentiment, I used the lovely Lantanas stamp set from Hurley Create, and I kind of curved the sentiment onto the block there. That's why I really love these Photopolymer stamps, because you can curve them on your acrylic block, and then I was able to stamp it along the curve of that circle. And I love this font and sentiment. It just says, "I appreciate you so much," which can be used in all different varieties of occasions. I love how this card turned out today, guys. It was pretty easy. The cutting out is the most time-consuming part, but it's such a great way to use those colorful and textured backgrounds that you created with your gel press and your stamped images. Now I'm going to use some of those extra backgrounds that I created to make one more card here. Now I like to kind of go in and soften some of those white areas, so I'll use the exact same color on my ink blender, but use a little bit of a lighter hand so that it still gives a two-toned effect there, but isn't as stark white. Now I'm going to use the lovely Lantanas image from, again, Simon Hurley Create, that same stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that down in jet black archival ink onto the pink background because I want that to be the color of all the different flowers. Then for the leaves, I'm going to go onto this green background, so these are the two backgrounds we created. You get lots out of one print, which I think is so awesome. And I'm going to stamp the leaves areas down onto this green cardstock there. So then once that's all complete, I'm going to go in with my fussy cutting scissors and again cut right around all of the different leaves that I want. There's only a few here, so I decided that the lesser area was the leaves, and that's what I was going to cut out. So I'm just going to go in here, cut out the different leaves in detail, and then I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive down and kind of puzzle it back over top of the image that's stamped onto that pink cardstock. So it's really easy to kind of line it up like a puzzle, and then it almost colors things in for you, which I think is so fun, but you still have all that amazing texture from those gel press prints. So once it was all finished, I cut out that main image and added it down onto a colored card base, stamped down the sentiment from that same stamp set, and I love how this turned out. It was super easy to do, and you totally can't get the same effect and texture from just any regular coloring. Those gel press backgrounds are so much fun. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video as much as I loved creating it. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to the Gel Press YouTube channel so you can see more videos from other talented designers. Alright guys, I'll see you very soon in another card making video. Have a great day. Bye!